Atlanta's airport hummed with its usual summer rush until Max suddenly froze. The German Shepherd's ears shot up, eyes locked on a Navy suitcase sliding down the carousel. Before Officer Sarah Miller could react, he lunged, barking with a ferocity that shattered the terminal's calm. Passengers screamed, security rushed in, and the suitcase tumbled to the floor. Max clawed at it relentlessly, refusing to back down. The bag looked ordinary, just another travel case. But Max's instincts were never wrong. And in that instant,
I love the way you look
everyone understood one terrifying truth.
I love you.
Whatever was inside that suitcase wasn't safe. Summer heat pressed against the glass walls of Atlanta's airport, turning the vast terminal into a shimmering box of light, metal, and restless human motion. Officer Sarah Miller walked along the polished floor with the long, steady stride of someone who knew how to move through chaos without ever letting it touch her. At 32, she was tall and lean, with the wiry strength of a runner. A woman built more from quiet endurance than brute force. Her dark brown hair was twisted into a no-nonsense bun at the nape of her neck, a few stubborn strands escaping to frame a face that was sharper than it was soft. High cheekbones, a straight nose, a mouth that looked like it had once laughed easily and had since forgotten how. Her skin carried a light olive tone that hinted at summers spent outdoors, not behind a desk, and her hazel eyes, flecked with green and gold, had the wary focus of someone who had seen things go wrong too quickly, too often. She wore the dark Navy K-9 unit uniform like a kind of armor, sleeves rolled just enough for movement, vest snug, boots broken in by long shifts and longer nights. At her side trotted Max, her partner, her shadow, and in the quietest corners of her life, the closest thing she let herself call family. Max was a 4-year-old German Shepherd with a powerful, athletic build, his sable coat a blend of black and tan that caught the overhead lights in subtle ripples as he moved. His ears were large and alert, his muzzle strong, and his amber eyes held an uncanny intelligence, too wise and too calm for a normal dog. There was a faint scar along his right flank, hidden beneath his K-9 vest, a souvenir from a training accident that hadn't been his fault, but had cost Sarah a former teammate. That teammate's scream and the sound of shattering glass still lived somewhere in the back of her mind, a memory she kept locked away behind the discipline in her posture and the professionalism in her voice. She trusted Max because he never pretended to be something he wasn't. He never faked courage, never lied about fear. He simply sensed, reacted, and protected. In a world where people wore masks, a dog who couldn't lie was the safest soul she knew. As they moved between gates, Sarah's gaze skimmed faces and hands. A businessman with a perfectly pressed suit and tired blue eyes. A mother with messy hair clutching a toddler who smelled of apple juice and sleep. A group of college kids laughing too loudly, dragging oversized backpacks that clattered over the floor. She cataloged them without realizing it. An instinct honed by years of repetition. Who looked anxious for normal reasons. Who was too calm. Who touched their bag a little too often. Max's nose did its own version of the same work. The invisible world of scent-painting stories she would never fully grasp. Coffee spills, laundry detergent, perfume, stress sweat, adrenaline. "Easy day so far, buddy," she murmured under her breath. Her voice was low, a little rough around the edges, like someone who had learned to keep most of her tenderness folded away. Max's tail gave a small, lazy wag, and for a brief moment, she let herself feel the illusion of an ordinary shift. Just another summer day at one of the busiest airports in the world. Just another crowd of strangers who would pass each other and never meet again. Then Max's head snapped up. His body stiffened in an instant so complete it felt like the air around him froze. The change was so sudden that Sarah, mid-step, felt a jolt of cold run through her chest. One heartbeat ago, Max had been relaxed, paws padding softly on the floor. Now every muscle in his frame was drawn tight like a bowstring. His ears pointed forward, his nostrils flared, and his amber eyes locked, without hesitation, without confusion, on a single object in the sea of movement, a Navy suitcase sliding along the carousel at baggage claim. Sarah felt the shift, the way a sailor feels the wind turn. "Max?" she whispered, her hand tightening on the leash. There was no response, no glance up at her, no reassuring flick of the tail. Max wasn't with her anymore. He was somewhere else, inside the tunnel of scent and instinct that made him what he was. The suitcase moved slowly, carried by the conveyor belt toward the line of waiting passengers. Its exterior was ordinary. Scuffed corners, a standard luggage tag swinging from the handle, a small airline sticker peeling at the edge. Nothing about it screamed danger to the human eye. But Max's reaction wasn't just alert. He was locked, as if every part of him recognized something hidden behind the fabric and zippers. Sarah felt her pulse start to pound, not from panic, but from the old, familiar battle between training and memory. Training said, follow protocol, call it in, keep calm, trust the process. Memory whispered of the time people had told her she was overreacting, that the situation was under control, right before it wasn't. Max let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated from his chest into the leash and up into Sarah's arm. She felt it like an electric current, snapping her fully into the moment. "All right," she breathed, more to herself than to him. "Show me." The suitcase drew closer, clanking gently as it bumped another bag. A middle-aged man in a light gray polo shirt and khaki shorts stepped forward toward the carousel, unaware that Max's gaze was already tracking both him and the luggage. The man had thinning blonde hair, a slightly soft belly, and the ordinary sun-reddened skin of someone who spent more time outside than a desk would allow. His expression was distracted, eyes flicking between the rotating belt and the notifications on his phone. He looked like a tourist, or maybe a salesman. He looked like everyone. And that, Sarah knew, was exactly why danger liked to hide in people like him. Max lunged. The movement was explosive, a sudden surge of muscle and determination. His bark tore through the noise of the terminal, sharp, furious, impossibly loud. The sound ricocheted off glass and metal, cutting through the murmur of conversations and the monotone drone of flight announcements. Passengers screamed and stumbled backward, clutching bags and children. Someone dropped a coffee that exploded across the floor in a brown arc. Another person raised a phone, already recording, because fear and curiosity were never far apart. Sarah planted her boots and fought the instinct to haul Max away on reflex. Her heart hammered in her throat, but beneath the fear there was something else, a deep, stubborn thread of trust. He had never done this without a reason. Never. The suitcase hit the edge of the carousel and tumbled to the floor with a dull thud. Max was on it in an instant, paw slamming down against the side, teeth bared, nose pressed so close the fabric brushed his whiskers. His growl deepened, turning into a sound almost primal, as if he was talking to something only he could sense. "What's wrong, Max?" Sarah called, the question more ritual than expectation. He wouldn't answer in words. He already was, in the language of every hair on his body standing on end. Eyes turned toward her. Security officers. A young TSA agent with dark skin and wide, frightened eyes. A boy of about 8 clutching his mother's hand, his small face pale with confusion. In all of their gazes, she could see the same unspoken demand. Make this stop. Make this safe. For a split second, doubt fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. What if it was nothing? What if he was reacting to a stray smell, a memory, a ghost of some past training exercise? What if she locked down half the terminal because of a dog's bad feeling? Then Max slammed his paw against the suitcase again and snarled, a raw, urgent sound that didn't belong to nerves or confusion. It belonged to certainty. Sarah straightened, decision snapping into place. "Clear the area!" she shouted, her voice ringing across the carousel. "Now! Back away from the belt! This is a potential threat!" The TSA agent jumped into motion, ushering people away with trembling hands. A few passengers protested, but the sight of Max, lips pulled back from his teeth, body rigid, focused entirely on that one Navy suitcase, silenced most arguments before they formed. The businessman in the gray polo shirt froze halfway to reaching for the handle, his phone slipping from his fingers and clattering to the floor. He stared at the dog, then at Sarah, his throat bobbing with a nervous swallow. That's my bag," he stammered. Is there a problem?" Sarah's gaze flicked from him to the suitcase and back again. She felt the sweat on her palms, the weight of 100 invisible eyes watching, the knowledge that whatever decision she made in the next few minutes could be the difference between false alarm and headline. Max's eyes never left the bag. His body trembled, not with fear, but with restraint. As if every part of him wanted to tear it open, yet some deep training held him just this side of action. Sarah drew in a slow breath. "Sir," she said, her voice controlled, almost gentle despite the tension tightening every muscle in her neck. "Step back behind the line. We're going to treat this as a serious threat until we know otherwise." For a heartbeat, the man looked like he might argue. Then Max growled again, low and deadly. Whatever he saw in the dog's eyes made him retreat without another word. The airport's familiar buzz had shifted into a different kind of hum now. Whispers, hurried footsteps, the crackle of radios coming to life. Sarah could feel the story forming in the air before a single reporter appeared. Canine dog goes crazy at Atlanta airport. Or if Max was right, something far darker. She kept her eyes on the suitcase, on the slight rise in the fabric where the contents pressed against the sides, on the way Max's nose hovered just above the seam, as if he could feel every secret inside. The bag looked ordinary, boring even. But Max's instincts had never been wrong. And as the first officers began to circle, setting up a perimeter around the carousel, Sarah knew with a bone-deep certainty that whatever was hidden inside that Navy shell had just changed their entire day, whether anyone else was ready to admit it yet or not. The heat inside Atlanta's terminal thickened as alarms crackled to life, and Officer Sarah Miller tightened her grip on Max's leash, her pulse pounding in her ears as uniformed personnel rushed to erect a yellow perimeter around the fallen Navy suitcase. And while passengers scattered in frightened waves, a new figure pushed through the gathering cluster of TSA agents. A tall man with broad shoulders and an unshaven jawline shadowed by 3-day stubble, his dark hair slightly tousled in a way that looked more natural than intentional. This was Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, 35, a cybersecurity investigator whose olive-toned skin and deep-set brown eyes carried the weary sharpness of someone who had spent too long staring at screens full of threats no one else believed in until they exploded into reality. Daniel had the no-nonsense posture of a military veteran, and in fact he was one. 6 years in Army intelligence, 2 tours overseas, and a quiet limp in his left leg he never talked about, but which shaped the clipped precision in his movements, giving him an air of someone always one step ahead of danger, but never quite fast enough to outrun his ghosts. He flashed his credentials as he approached Sarah, studying her with a quick, assessing glance that lingered just long enough to register respect. He noted her athletic frame, the reserved strength in her posture, the way her hazel eyes stayed locked on Max, as if the dog were both compass and shield, and he understood instantly that she was not someone who exaggerated threats. Max himself stood rigid, the sable fur along his spine raised like hackles of electricity, and when Daniel crouched slightly to observe the bag, the dog growled low, not at Daniel, but at the suitcase, as if something inside pulsed with a wrongness no human could smell. A bomb technician, Officer Linda Graves, a compact woman in her 40s with freckles clustering across her cheeks and sharp gray eyes that missed nothing, arrived next, carrying the portable X-ray scanner. Linda was known for her dry wit and steady nerves, traits that had helped her survive several close calls in her 20-year career, though the slight tremor in her left hand betrayed how much early career trauma she still carried, a detail Sarah noticed but did not comment on. As Linda set the scanner in place, Daniel joined Sarah at her shoulder, his voice low and smooth, carrying a kind of quiet confidence that contrasted with Sarah's steel-edged focus. "Your dog's reaction. That's not false alarm behavior." Sarah nodded stiffly, not yet ready for dialogue, her past mistakes whispering warnings, but something about Daniel's grounded presence kept her from brushing him off. The scanner hummed as the image materialized. No explosives, no wires. But both Linda and Daniel frowned, seeing irregular density patterns beneath the visible layer, and Max's renewed snarl confirmed what Sarah already felt in her bones. Something was hidden deeper. Meanwhile, the man in the gray polo, the supposed owner of the suitcase, shifted nervously behind the tape, sweat forming on his reddened forehead. He was joined by a friend who had just arrived, a thin man named Bradley Carter, early 40s, with sandy hair and a narrow face marked by worry lines, wearing a wrinkled button-up shirt that suggested a long flight or a habitually chaotic lifestyle. Bradley tried to speak up for his friend, insisting the luggage was harmless, but his darting blue eyes and twitchy fingers made him appear more anxious than convincing. Daniel ordered the suitcase moved to the secondary inspection zone, and Sarah noticed a subtle change in the businessman's demeanor. A stiffness, a swallow, a flicker of guilt, so faint that a less trained observer would have missed it. Max didn't miss it. His head snapped toward the man, lips lifting in a warning that made the man step back with a startled hesp. When Linda pried open the lining with careful tools, the false compartment clicked softly, a sound that tightened every muscle in Sarah's body, revealing bundles of documents, ID cards, and encrypted digital drives neatly tucked into foam slots. Daniel exhaled sharply through his nose. He recognized the pattern immediately. Data smuggling, identity harvesting, the digital crime world bleeding into physical borders. Sarah's heartbeat raced, not out of fear, but validation. Max had been right. Again. Yet something felt unfinished, like the suitcase was only the doorway, not the threat itself. As if on cue, Max jerked his head toward the crowd, ears forward, nose flaring sharply. Sarah followed his gaze and spotted her. A woman in a flowing red summer dress, tall, elegant, with long honey-blonde hair cascading over her shoulders and sunglasses masking her eyes, though her stillness amid the chaos was unsettling, too deliberate. This was no panicked passenger. The woman's posture was graceful yet predatory, and when her hidden gaze turned toward Sarah, a small smirk curved her lips before she pivoted and slipped into the crowd, moving with a smoothness that made her look almost rehearsed. "We've got someone leaving," Sarah murmured, already sensing the chase taking shape. Daniel turned, spotting only a flash of red disappearing behind a column. "You think she's connected?" Sarah answered with the tight certainty of instinct. "Max does." And as Max lunged forward, leading the way into the bustling terminal, Sarah checked her radio. Daniel stepped beside her, and the three of them surged into the sea of summer travelers, toward the woman in red, toward the truth hidden behind a navy suitcase, and toward a danger that was only beginning to reveal its shape. The terminal's summer heat had shifted into a vibrating tension as Sarah, Daniel, and Max pushed through the dense flow of travelers, chasing the disappearing flash of the woman's red dress. And the deeper they moved into the crowd, the more Sarah felt her pulse fuse with Max's urgent strides. The German shepherd, 4 years old and built like a moving spring of muscle and purpose, wove through rolling suitcases and clusters of confused passengers with the precision of a creature following a scent that cut through the air like a blade. Daniel stayed close behind them, his longer strides compensating for his slight limp, the one on his left leg that he tried to hide but couldn't fully erase. The old injury had come from shrapnel during his second overseas deployment, leaving him with a habit of scanning every direction at once, eyes constantly measuring distance, threat, escape routes, traits that shaped his cautious but razor-sharp temperament. They reached the terminal's wide main concourse when Max halted, nose pressed to the tiled floor, following an invisible trail that led toward the escalators. Sarah spotted the tail end of the red dress swaying as the woman descended, her movements smooth and practiced, as if she had rehearsed disappearing in a crowd since childhood. "She's heading for the lower atrium," Daniel said, voice low but steady, his focus cutting through the noise. "She knows this layout better than a tourist." Sarah's jaw tightened. She felt the old pressure building behind her ribs, the feeling she got before a situation tipped into danger. She scanned quickly, noticing a janitor pushing a cart nearby, a stocky older man with dark skin, salt and pepper beard, and tired eyes. His name tag read Joel, and though he seemed like an ordinary airport worker with worn sneakers and shoulders rounded by long shifts, the flicker of confusion on his face as he gestured toward the woman confirmed what Sarah suspected. He had seen her slip by. "She was fast," Joel muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Didn't look like someone late for a flight. Looked like someone running from something." Max tugged hard, dragging Sarah toward the escalator entrance. They descended into the cooler, dimmer atrium area where shops created a maze of neon lights and reflections. Max's ears twitched and he led them past a smoothie stand run by a young man with bleached blonde hair and tattoos down both arms. He barely looked up from blending fruit, his bored expression betraying no recognition of danger. But the subtle jerk of his chin pointed to the left, toward a hallway labeled "Authorized Personnel Only." Sarah gave him a sharp look, and the teen shrugged, tapping his temple as if to say, "I'm not stupid." I saw her too. The hallway smelled of detergent and machinery, the air cooler against Sarah's warm skin. Her hazel eyes adjusted quickly, sweeping across metal doors and crates. Daniel placed a hand on her arm, his touch careful but firm. He had learned from experience that rushing into a blind corner could end with bodies on the floor or missions collapsing. "We go slow," he murmured. "She's not just running. She's leading us." Sarah hated that he was right. But Max was already pressing forward, nose low, paws silent against concrete, his tail straight like an arrow locked on a target. They moved past stacked luggage carts, humming generators, and a row of lockers until Max suddenly stopped beside a narrow service door, his teeth bared in a soft, contained growl. Sarah pushed the door open and stepped into a maintenance corridor buzzing with fluorescent lights. There, at the far end, stood the woman in the red dress. She was tall, willowy, with a posture too elegant for the industrial setting. Her honey-blonde hair framed a face that might have been beautiful if not for its coldness. Sharp cheekbones, thin lips, and eyes that glimmered with calculated detachment. She held no suitcase, no bag. Only a small silver device in her right hand. A sleek rectangle with blinking blue light. "You're quick," she said, voice smooth, with a faint coastal accent that hinted at raised wealth rather than earned strength. Most officers would still be arguing over the suitcase. Daniel stepped forward slightly, shielding Sarah by instinct, even though he knew she didn't need protection. "Drop the device," he ordered. "Now." The woman smiled, not mocking, but almost pitying. "You're too late." Max barked sharply, the sound echoing through the narrow corridor. Sarah felt the vibration of it travel into her bones. She took a single step forward, her lean frame tense, her olive-toned skin warm beneath the flickering lights. She saw something change in the woman's eyes. Recognition. Not of Sarah's name, but of her type. The kind of officer who didn't quit the chase, who didn't run from the hard truth. "Whatever you took," Sarah said, voice low, "you're not walking out of here with it." The woman tilted her head. "You think I'm the one carrying it?" Daniel moved then, reaching toward his radio, but the woman pressed a button on the silver device and the lights above them flickered violently. A loud metallic crash echoed from behind. Sarah spun. A rolling cage full of airport laundry supplies had slammed sideways, blocking the exit. Footsteps thundered deeper in the corridor. The woman wasn't alone. A man stepped out of a connecting doorway. Tall, muscular, mid-30s, with a shaved head, sharp jawline, and thick beard. His brown skin glistened with sweat, and a jagged scar cut across his left eyebrow, giving him a perpetually fierce expression. He wore a maintenance vest but carried himself like someone trained to kill rather than clean. His name tag read Marcus, but Sarah doubted that was his real name. Max snarled, positioning himself between Sarah and the threat. Marcus cracked his knuckles. "She bought time," he said, his deep voice rumbling. "Now I finish the job." The woman slipped away behind him, disappearing into the maze. Daniel swore under his breath and reached for Sarah, but Max lunged first, forcing Marcus back with a ferocious bark. Sarah stepped into position beside her dog, heart racing, but focus razor-sharp. She wasn't just chasing a suspect anymore. She and Max had walked straight into the next layer of a hidden operation. And they were outnumbered, but not outmatched. Not yet. The maintenance corridor vibrated with a tension so thick it seemed to pulse beneath the fluorescent lights as Sarah steadied her stance beside Max. Her lean, athletic frame coiled like a drawn bowstring, while her olive-toned skin glistened lightly with sweat from the chase. Max, 4 years old and trained to respond without hesitation, held his ground with a low, steady growl, the sable fur along his spine raised in a sharp ridge of warning as he positioned himself between his partner and the looming threat named Marcus. The man blocking their path was taller than Daniel by nearly a head, built with the hulking density of someone who had spent years forcing his body into a weapon. His skin was a deep, warm brown, marked by scars that mapped a life shaped by violence. Most notably, the thick slash through his left eyebrow that gave his dark eyes an unsettling and permanently hostile intensity. The thick black beard circling his jaw sharpened the ferocity of his expression, and his muscular arms stretched against the seams of the neon maintenance vest he clearly did not earn through honest work. Marcus's posture radiated a cold confidence, the kind that came from a man who had fought in places where rules didn't matter, and the only currency was survival. Behind Sarah, Daniel Ruiz stepped up, his broad shoulders lifting as he squared himself into position. Though his 3-day stubble and tired brown eyes made him look rugged and slightly worn down, his military history lent weight to his movements. He carried himself like someone who had been here before, in corridors that smelled of metal and risk, with enemies who didn't hesitate. He knew how to fight, how to take a hit, how to keep breathing even when logic screamed to run. "Stay behind me," Daniel murmured. But Sarah shook her head once, sharp and controlled, because she wasn't the kind of woman who let others take a hit for her. Her hazel eyes flicked toward the direction where the woman in the red dress had disappeared. But the silver device's lingering hum in the air told her they had no time to worry about the runner. Marcus had been left behind to make sure they never caught her again. Marcus cracked his knuckles, a slow, deliberate sound that echoed like a threat in the narrow hall. And then he smirked. A small, crooked lift of his lip that revealed the chaos in him, the part that enjoyed this. "You two should have stayed upstairs," he rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly, shaped by years of shouting commands or perhaps taking them in far more dangerous environments. "Now I have to deal with you." Max barked once, sharp and explosive, and the sound jolted Marcus slightly backward. Sarah saw the opening and surged forward, using her speed rather than brute force. She moved like a blade slicing through heat, aiming to draw Marcus's focus while Max circled low. Marcus swung his arm at her like he meant to break through bone, but Sarah ducked under it, adrenaline burning like summer fire in her veins. Daniel lunged in next, landing a solid punch to Marcus's ribs. It barely staggered him, but it bought a half-second advantage. "Big guy," Daniel muttered under his breath, shaking the sting from his knuckles. Marcus lunged at him with surprising speed, grabbing Daniel by the vest and slamming him into the metal wall. The clang echoed down the corridor. Sarah spun and aimed a kick at Marcus's knee, her boot connecting hard enough to make him grunt and loosen his grip on Daniel. Max took his cue instantly. He launched forward with the coiled power of a trained K9, jaws snapping as he clamped onto Marcus's forearm. The man roared, a deep, furious sound reverberating through the hall, and he reared back, trying to shake the dog off. Sarah felt every second stretch thin as wire. She rushed forward to help, grabbing Marcus's vest and using her leverage to yank him off balance. Marcus stumbled, falling sideways into a stack of plastic crates that rattled under his weight. Max released and lunged again, forcing Marcus to brace himself by grabbing the side rail of a laundry cart. "You're going to pay for that," Marcus growled, glaring at Sarah, his bloodshot eyes flickering with a dangerous mix of rage and surprise. He clearly hadn't expected the officer to fight this hard, or the dog to attack with such precision. Daniel pushed forward again, jaw clenched, the old pain in his leg forcing a slight grimace across his stubbled face. But he ignored it and threw another punch, this one aimed at Marcus's jaw. The hit connected. Marcus slumped, his body finally giving under the combined assault. Sarah handcuffed him quickly, her breath coming fast but controlled. Max stayed pressed against her leg, the heat of his body grounding her back into the moment. "He's just the muscle," Daniel said, chest rising as he caught his breath. "The woman, she's the brains." Sarah nodded grimly. "And she's still in the building." They dragged Marcus away from the corridor door just as two airport security officers arrived. One of them a young woman named Kelsey Tran, petite with sharp black hair and determined dark eyes. She looked only 25 at most, but carried herself with the nervous courage of someone who wanted badly to prove she belonged. "We got your alert," Kelsey said breathlessly. "What the hell happened here?" Sarah exchanged a look with Daniel, one forged from shared chaos, and then answered, "A bigger operation than this terminal can handle." Max gave a low rumble, turning his nose toward the hallway where the red-dressed woman had escaped. Sarah tightened her grip on the leash. The chase wasn't over. It had only just begun. The maintenance corridor still hummed faintly from the disruption the silver device had caused, but Sarah's mind had already leapt beyond Marcus's capture toward the one person who mattered. The woman in the red summer dress, the calculated architect of the chaos unfolding in Atlanta's airport. Sarah's lean, athletic body moved with renewed purpose as she guided Max toward the far end of the corridor, her hazel eyes sharp and fierce beneath the overhead lights. Max, the 4-year-old German shepherd with the sable coat and amber eyes, trotted ahead with focused determination, still keyed in on the scent trail left behind by the fugitive. Daniel followed close behind, his tall and broad frame casting long shadows on the concrete walls. The slight limp in his left leg had worsened from the fight, but the former military intel officer, rugged jawline, rough stubble, and a temperament built from years of surviving impossible situations, pushed forward without complaint. He scanned every corner, every door, every shadow, because men who had survived war rarely stopped expecting ambushes. Kelsey Tran, the petite security officer with sharp black hair and youthful determination, jogged at Daniel's side, still breathing heavily from the adrenaline of her first real confrontation, but refusing to show fear. Her dark eyes flicked everywhere at once, absorbing the tense movements of those more experienced around her, trying to match their pace. As they exited the corridor, the trio stepped into a broader service zone filled with moving luggage belts, rumbling machinery, and half-shuttered loading docks. A thin man in a reflective vest stood nearby, a luggage handler with tired brown eyes and sun-beaten skin that spoke of long shifts spent outdoors. His name patch read Terry. He paused mid-task, confusion spreading across his face as he noticed the tension radiating from the group. Terry was wiry and lean, the kind of man who looked like life had worn down every soft edge, leaving sharp angles and quiet resignation behind. "You folks chasing someone?" he asked, his voice raspy from years of breathing dust from conveyor belts. Sarah nodded, wasting no time. "A woman in a red dress, tall, blonde, moving fast." Terry blinked slowly, then lifted a hand and pointed toward the south entrance. "Saw her slip past the carts 5 minutes ago. Didn't look like she belonged here." Sarah exchanged a look with Daniel. Confirmation. The woman was still ahead. Max surged forward, nose pressed to the ground, and Sarah followed, her boots pounding against the concrete as she pushed through rows of idle carts. The air smelled of grease, old luggage, and fresh danger. They turned a corner and entered a dim holding area where flickering lights cast long shadows across metal shelves. A soft metallic clang echoed in the distance. Max's ears shot up. Sarah froze, hand lowering instinctively toward her holster. Someone was moving. Daniel raised a hand, silently, signaling caution, and in the same motion, he pressed his back against a crate, his breathing steady despite the pain shooting up his leg. They advanced slowly. The holding area opened into a narrow staging space near the south exit, a place where employees took smoke breaks and couriers loaded packages. And at the far end, standing beneath the harsh glow of an overhead lamp, was an older man in a faded security vest. His posture slumped, his shoulders hunched. He looked to be in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair, pale skin, and watery blue eyes that widened in fear when he saw the officers. His name tag, barely hanging onto his vest, read, Edward Hale. "Stop right there," Sarah commanded, stepping forward. Edward lifted trembling hands. I didn't do anything. I just got back from break." His voice cracked, and up close, Sarah noticed the deep lines etched into his face, the kind carved not by age but by worry. Daniel stepped closer, scanning him with a soldier's instincts. "You see a woman in red come through here?" Edward hesitated. Too long. His eyes flicked toward the exit door behind him. Sarah caught the movement. So did Max. The dog barked sharply, lunging forward until the leash snapped taut. Edward flinched violently. Daniel's expression hardened. "Sir," he said, voice low and edged with warning. That was the wrong time to lie. Edward swallowed, throat bobbing. She forced me," he stammered. "Said she'd kill me if I said anything. She went through the exit. Told me to delay anyone coming this way." Sarah's pulse quickened. The woman had help everywhere she went, willing or terrified. "Did she have anything with her?" Sarah demanded. Edward nodded, sweat beading at his temples. "A small black case, like a hard drive or something." Daniel muttered, "Data extraction device. She's offloading something." Sarah tightened her grip on Max's leash. The woman wasn't just fleeing, she was completing the mission. "Which direction?" Sarah demanded. Edward pointed shakily toward the door, leading outside to the restricted cargo roadway. Sarah didn't waste another second. She pushed through the exit, hot summer air slamming into her face. The roadway stretched long and empty under the sun, shimmering with heat waves. A service van sat idling at the far end. And through the haze, she saw her, red dress fluttering, blonde hair catching the light. The woman turned just enough for their eyes to meet across the distance. Then she stepped into the van. The door slammed. The engine roared. Max barked, ready to sprint. Sarah whispered, "This isn't over." But the van sped away, disappearing around the curve of the tarmac road. Sarah stood rigid, chest rising and falling with adrenaline and frustration as Daniel approached, steadying himself on the rail. "We'll get her," he said quietly. But Sarah didn't take her eyes off the road. "No, Shaw," murmured, "Max will." And Max, standing tall, ears high, stare locked on the direction of the van, seemed to agree. When all the chaos finally settled, one truth remained shining through every frantic moment. Sometimes God sends his help in forms we never expect. A loyal dog, a woman who refuses to give up, a stranger who chooses courage over silence. In the middle of confusion, fear, and danger, there is always a thread of grace, quiet, steady, unbreakable, guiding us towards safety, truth, and light. Maybe that is the miracle hidden inside stories like this. A reminder that when the world feels uncertain, when we're overwhelmed, when we're standing in battles we never asked for, God is already working behind the scenes. He places the right people in our path, the right instincts in our hearts, and the right protection around us even before we know we need it. And just like Sarah trusted Max, maybe we too must learn to trust the signs God places in front of us. Subtle whispers, gentle nudges, moments that look like coincidence but are really small acts of divine mercy. As you go back to your own day, your work, your family, your quiet struggles, I pray that God wraps His protection around you the same way He watched over them. May He guard your steps, calm your fears, and bless your home with peace. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story of courage, faith, and miracles. May God bless you, protect you, and keep you safe, today and always.